My name is Clara May Thornton. I'm 68 years old, and for nearly 5 decades I was the quiet backbone of Willow Creek Vineyard, a small organic winery nestled in the misty valleys of Oregon's Willamette region. My hands, now gnarled with arthritis, still carry the memory of crushing grapes for our signature Pinot Noir, pruning vines at dawn, and bottling wine by lamplight with my husband, Thomas. We built this place from nothing, a patch of wild land turned into rows of thriving vines, a home, a legacy. For 46 years we poured our hearts into this vineyard, raising 2 children, Michael and Laura, amidst the scent of fermenting grapes and the hum of summer cicadas. 3 weeks ago, I buried Thomas. We'd been married since 1979, partners in every sense, tending the land, balancing the books, raising our family. His death wasn't sudden. Lung cancer stole him slowly over 16 months, eroding the man who once carried 50-pound crates without breaking a sweat. His final months were spent in a haze of painkillers, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't tell the kids yet," he'd said one night, his hand frail in mine. "Let them have their lives a little longer." I honoured his wish, though it weighed heavy, but deep down I already knew our children had drifted far from the vineyard's roots, long before the diagnosis. Michael, our eldest, had carved out a high-powered career in Seattle's tech scene, building algorithms and chasing promotions. He hadn't spent more than a weekend at the vineyard in over a decade, his visits brief and distracted, always tethered to his phone. Laura, our youngest, floated between fleeting dreams, ecotourism startups, wellness retreats, each one funded by Thomas's savings, each one collapsing under her optimism. I'd hoped grief would tether them back to the vineyard, to the evenings we spent around the oak table, laughing over simple meals of bread and wine. I thought they'd remember the love that built this place, the family we were, but when they arrived for the funeral, I saw strangers in their eyes, not children mourning their father. The night after the funeral, I sat alone in the kitchen, tracing the worn grooves of our dining table, its surface etched with decades of meals and memories. The house was too quiet, without Thomas's low chuckle or the clink of his glass. I told Michael and Laura we could sort through their father's belongings together the next day. A small gesture, a mother's hope, to weave memory into loss. But they had other plans. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the vineyard's old linen curtains, ones Thomas and I had chosen together in a Portland antique shop 30 years ago. I brewed Thomas's favourite black tea, not the sharp espresso Michael preferred, and waited at the table, my hands folded, my heart heavy with anticipation. They came downstairs, dressed not for a family moment, but for a transaction. Michael wore a crisp blazer, his face all business. Laura's silk dress and polished nails spoke of boardrooms, not vineyards. "Mom," Michael began, setting his mug down with the same deliberate precision I'd seen in Thomas when he balanced our ledgers. "We've been talking." Laura glanced at him, then at me, her smile tight. "It's time to settle things. The estate, the vineyard, the house." I blinked, the words landing like stones. "Settle?" I echoed, my voice quieter than I felt. "It's practical," Michael said. "You can't manage the vineyard alone. The house, it's too big for you now, Mom. Too much at your age. My age." The phrase hung heavy. I'd tended vines through storms, driven deliveries in snow, baked for community fundraisers, and taught local kids about soil health. My hands were weathered, but they were far from weak. Laura's voice softened, but it carried the polish of a sales pitch. There's a retirement community an hour away, Green Hills Retreat. It's lovely, activities, people your age. I stood to clear the breakfast plates, needing movement to steady my trembling hands. Then Michael slid a folder across the table. Dad spoke to me about this last year, he said, his tone clipped. He wanted Laura and me to take over. The documents bore Thomas's signature, too neat, too steady for a man whose hands shook in his final months. This isn't from our lawyer, I said, my eyes fixed on the paper. He was lucid when he signed, Michael insisted. Laura added quickly, a developer's offering $6 million for the land. You'd be secure, Mum. A fresh start. A developer. They wanted to sell the vineyard, to uproot decades of care and turn our life's work into subdivisions. You're talking about erasing your father's legacy, I said, my voice low but steady. Michael's response was cold. The vineyard's not sustainable, Mum. Be reasonable. A fire stirred in me, the kind I hadn't felt since I chased off a coyote threatening our chickens years ago. Show me the will, I said. Michael hesitated, then pushed the folder closer. I didn't touch it. We'll talk tomorrow, I said, turning away. But I already knew there'd be no real conversation. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed Thomas and I had shared, listening to the creaks of the old farmhouse and the rustle of vines outside. Every sound was familiar, a language of home. But my children's hearts had become foreign, their loyalty replaced by calculation. By morning the sharp scent of Michael's espresso filled the house, a bitter intruder's aroma. My joints ached, not from age but from betrayal, as I moved downstairs. They were waiting, coats on, a suitcase packed, not mine. We packed essentials for you, Laura said, her voice bright but brittle. We thought we could drive you to Green Hills today, just to look. I poured my tea, my hands steady. I'm not going to a retirement home. Michael checked his watch, impatient. Mum, the paperwork's done. The sale closes next week. You can't stay. I stared at him, seeing not the boy who once trailed Thomas through the vines, asking about fermentation, but a man who saw me as an obstacle. I need my medication and some photos, I said, stepping away. Laura nodded, relieved. Take whatever you want. We'll ship the rest. Upstairs I gathered my pills, but also something they didn't know existed. Behind a loose panel in the bathroom cabinet, installed when Thomas worried about theft in the 80s, I retrieved my passport and birth certificate. In the closet, behind his old wool sweaters, I pulled out a fireproof box heavy with more than sentiment. Inside was the original deed to 15 acres of vineyard land, purchased in my maiden name before our marriage. It wasn't just land, it held the only natural spring on the property, the lifeblood of irrigation. Without it, no vines could grow, no development could thrive. Thomas had called it our just-in-case safety net. Now it was my lifeline. I returned downstairs, my purse heavier, my resolve lighter. Ready? Michael asked, his tone expectant. Sure, I said, letting Laura guide me to the car. I let them believe I was defeated. We drove past the vineyard's budding rose, past the community centre where I'd taught gardening classes, past the library where I'd read to children. But instead of heading toward Green Hills, Michael veered onto a remote dirt road. 20 minutes later he stopped beside an empty field. This is where you get off, Mom, he said, his voice flat, as if announcing a bus stop. There's a diner a few miles up. Laura's smile faltered. Michael, what? She'll contest the will cause trouble, he cut her off. This is cleaner. She has her meds, clothes. He opened my door, and just like that, they left me on a gravel shoulder with a suitcase not my own, and the dust of their departure settling around me. I stood still, the spring breeze tugging at my coat, clutching the suitcase they'd packed. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't broken. I was free. I began walking, not toward the diner Michael mentioned, but toward town, toward my next move. My flats weren't meant for gravel, and the sun warmed my neck, but each step sharpened my resolve. In my purse were my ID, passport, medication and the deed to 15 acres, land Michael and Laura didn't know existed, land that held the vineyard's only water source. They thought they'd outmaneuvered me, but they didn't understand the soil they stood on, the weight of legacy. I did. After nearly 2 hours, my feet blistered but my spirit unbroken, I reached Willow Creek's general store, a weathered building unchanged by time. Sam Carter, who'd known me for 30 years, stepped out, wiping his hands on his apron. "Clara, you all right?" he asked, eyeing the suitcase. "Just resting, Sam," I said, sitting on the bench outside. "Real sorry about Thomas. Good man?" "Yes." I nodded. He was. He hesitated, then offered, "Need the phone?" I nodded and followed him inside, past shelves of canned fruit and local honey, to a small office. I dialed Margaret Klein, our family lawyer, from memory. "Clara," she answered, surprised. "I've been trying to reach you. Michael presented a will. It doesn't match the one Thomas and I updated last year." I explained everything, the funeral, the forged will, the roadside abandonment, the deed. "Meet me in an hour," she said. "You have my help and my discretion." I hung up and turned to Sam. "Sell prepaid phones?" He nodded, refusing my money. "On the house, Clara. Anything else, you just say." Margaret Klein's office sat above the town bookstore, its walls lined with legal tomes and the faint scent of paper. She was a no-nonsense woman, her grey hair pulled back, her eyes sharp despite her years. She led me to a pair of armchairs by a window overlooking Willow Creek's main street. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The funeral, the cold discussion in our kitchen, the fake will, the drive, the abandonment, every detail. Then I opened the fireproof box and handed her the deed to the 15 acres. She examined it, her expression reverent. "This is gold, Clara. With the water rights, the developer can't move forward without this." "I know," I said. "The will Michael submitted is a forgery," she continued. "Thomas's signature was too clean for a man in hospice. We'll challenge it, but this deed, it's immediate leverage." I looked out the window, watching a young family cross the street, unaware of the quiet battle unfolding. "I want my home back," I said, "and I want them to understand what they've done." "They will," Margaret promised. "We'll make sure of it." By noon the next day, Margaret filed an emergency injunction to freeze any transfer of Willow Creek Vineyard's ownership. A courier delivered a letter to the development firm, outlining the separate ownership of the critical 15 acres and the water rights. Within hours, the developer paused the deal, their lawyers scrambling for clarification. I told them the truth, Margaret said as we reviewed documents in her office. "The land is incomplete. The water rights aren't transferable, and your children lack the authority they claim." That evening, Laura texted my prepaid phone. "Mom, please call. We didn't know about the other land. Can we fix this?" No apology, just panic as their plan unraveled. I didn't reply. Michael called Margaret, demanding answers, but she informed him all matters were now legal. "They miscalculated," she said, her voice calm. "Badly. They thought I had nothing, I replied, but I had everything they forgot to value. I didn't return to the farmhouse. I rented a small apartment above the town cafe, its windows overlooking the rolling hills of Willow Creek. The space was simple, with a tiny balcony just big enough for a rocking chair and a few potted herbs. Mornings smelled of fresh coffee and warm scones from below. It wasn't the home Thomas and I built, but it was mine, and that mattered. I started teaching again, wine-making workshops at the community centre, sharing decades of knowledge about soil, vines, and fermentation. Young farmers came, retirees came, even couples dreaming of their own vineyards. They listened, not because I shouted, but because I spoke with history in my hands. The 15 acres, with their vital spring, I donated to the Willow Creek Agricultural Trust, a local cooperative supporting new farmers. The land would stay alive, its vines tended, not sold for profit. The developer pulled out entirely, spooked by the legal complications and incomplete land rights. The forged will was formally challenged, frozen in court. Whispers reached me that Michael and Laura's reputations had taken a hit in Seattle and beyond. I didn't gloat. Revenge wasn't my aim. Truth was. The vineyard remained untouched, its rose blooming as spring deepened. Each time I passed it on my walks, I smiled, not with bitterness, but with the quiet strength of a woman who'd reclaimed her voice and her place. I often think back to that moment on the dirt road, standing alone with a suitcase I didn't pack, watching my children drive away without looking back. It should have broken me, but it didn't. In that silence, I heard a truth I'd ignored for years. Love doesn't mean blind loyalty, and being a mother doesn't mean enduring betrayal. Michael and Laura thought grief and age had weakened me, that I'd surrender everything, but they forgot who I was. Clara May, a woman who built a vineyard with her hands, her heart, and her mind. My strength was never in shouting, but in knowing what I stood for. If you've ever been cast aside, treated as a footnote in your own life, hear this. Your power isn't in how loud you fight, but in how deeply you know your worth. When you stand your ground, even quietly, it echoes louder than any betrayal. My vineyard still stands. My name is on the deed. My life is mine again. So to anyone told this is where you get off, I say, walk if you must, but don't leave your worth behind. Walk with purpose. Walk with quiet power. And when you're ready, tell your story. It might just save someone else. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. And if you've ever been underestimated and found your strength, tell us. Your story matters.